Welcome back to another episode of Your Hope-Filled Perspective, where it's always our goal to restore hope, renew minds, and empower listeners to live in their God-given identity. You know, when we get to this part of the year, it's a time that's filled with wonder and excitement and a little bit of stress and chaos. And today, I've asked my guest and friend, Christine Trimpe, to join us to help us prepare our hearts for the Advent season. I think it's so easy, especially given where the world is at large right now, to get so sucked in by the commercialism and by the stress and the chaos and the planning that sometimes we can lose sight of the real reason for the season. For today's episode, I want us to remember Luke chapter 2, verse 19, that says, "But Mary treasured all these things and pondered them in her heart." To me, what that says is that Mary took the time to think about what was important. Today's guest is Christine Trimpe, who's a former casual Christian who is now passionate about Christ, coffee, and connecting one-on-one with you for some joy-centered conversation. Christine's transformation story and victory over obesity and chronic illness of her body, mind, and spirit will inspire you to strengthen your own joy-fueled adventure with Jesus. She's been where you've been, where you are, or where you want to be through different seasons of trials, tribulations, and triumphs. Today, we're going to be talking about preparing for the Advent season, and I couldn't think of anyone better to have on the program because Christine's got a new book about preparing our hearts for that. Christine's been on my program before, so if you missed that episode, you're going to want to go back and listen to her inspiring, life-changing story. But today, let's talk about Advent. Welcome back to the program, Christine.
Thank you, Michelle. I am just overjoyed to be here today to talk about my favorite season of the year, the Christmas season.
What was it that inspired you and motivated you to write Seeking Joy Through the Gospel of Luke, a Christmas to Calvary Advent countdown?
Well, just a brief history about the Christmas countdown. In 2018, I started blogging through the book of Luke on my Bible and Beans blog. And I just thought it would be a great way to inspire women to get into the Word every day, because I like to, as a health coach, I like to encourage people and remind them that you can do anything hard for 21 days. And I just extended it out a little bit and said, let's do this for 24 days through the book of Luke. There's 24 days before Christmas, and there's 24 chapters in Luke. So it's just my way of getting people and encouraging them to get in the Word every day. And so my blog series, people enjoyed it. And so I continued to do that every year. And the Lord impressed on me last year was the most unusual Christmas season, as you know. And I looked around the world and I just saw the weariness. And my favorite Christmas song is "O Holy Night." And the lyrics, "The weary world rejoices," just kept playing over and over in my mind as I looked around and saw what my friends, my family were experiencing, what I was experiencing personally. And the Lord just impressed on me that I needed to go a little bit further with these blog posts and turn them into chapters. And so that's what I did. It actually wrote enough during the month of December in 2020 to have enough material for a book.
I love it. And your book is really focusing on the Advent season. But you know, that word Advent can sound like a real churchy term, and not everyone understands what Advent is. So how would you explain Advent?
Well, in the church that I grew up in, we didn't celebrate Advent like liturgically, how it implies. A lot of people think of it as like a very liturgical type of thing. So for me, Advent means like a great expectation of the birth of Christ. Before we get into the book of Luke, we see that the people had been so hungry for a Messiah, and there was a great expectation coming out of that season of silence from the Lord. And so I get excited about the expectation, the waiting, the preparation for the birth of Christ. And then even going further with the idea of Advent, I get excited about the expectation of the second coming of Christ too.
have you historically done anything special to celebrate Advent season as opposed to Christmas?
No, like our church, the church I grew up in was a Christian non-denominational church. We didn't ever celebrate anything like Advent. But recently, in the past couple of years, we've done like Sunday candles in my church and things like that. And so I knew the idea of Advent, but as I looked into it when picking the title of my book, I got stuck on the description of it as being like just an expectation. And every Christmas, like as a child, you have this breathless expectation of Christmas morning. And then, just growing and maturing in my spiritual life in recent years, I just wake up every morning with this expectation of everything that the Lord's going to do and in this joy-filled journey that I'm on right now.
I love that, because really, I think too many of us put all the focus on Christmas morning and the expectation of the gifts under the tree and the family that comes to celebrate and the meal that's going to be served. But I think really, just like you pointed out in Luke, we've got, if you take a chapter a day, we can really spend the whole month of December preparing our hearts and refocusing back on really what's most important. In our society, it's so commercialized that it's easy to get overwhelmed with all the things and all the to-dos and forget why we're really even celebrating.
Right, exactly.
We're going to take a real short commercial break, but then I really want to jump into the meat of how do we prepare our hearts for Advent. We'll be right back after this commercial break. Welcome back to Your Hope-Filled Perspective, where today my guest is friend Christine Trimpe, and Christine has just written a book, Seeking Joy Through the Gospel of Luke, a Christmas to Calvary Advent Countdown. Christine, when did you realize that the true understanding of joy had been missing in your life? Because that's a central theme that runs through everything you do now, and that's something that I love about you. But when did you come to realize that that had been missing?
Wow, I think it was very early on in my health and healing journey when I finally realized that I was responding to stressful and annoying situations in such a different manner. Like I used to be a very short-tempered, critical. I used to have a critical spirit, and the Lord got a hold of my heart without even me realizing it. And so the way I began responding to situations and trials is when I finally realized that I'm starting to understand what this joy thing is that I've heard about, my entire life growing up, but I never really fully understood, what the joy deep down in my heart, what that was supposed to look like.
And for you, how does joy differ from happiness?
Oh, for me, when I started my health and healing journey, my life transformation, I used to be what you would call a happy person. I tried to, put on a good face, and I wasn't like an angry person going around. I had friends and stuff like that, but it's just finally digging into God's word on a daily basis and truly understanding what the fruits of the spirit were, what Jesus, when I stopped being a casual Christian and started being a committed Christian to, learning about Jesus and meeting with him every morning and just growing and developing and growing in spiritual maturity, I started learning about all those fruits of the spirit are for us, and that's what he's calling us to live in. And of course, my favorite to talk about is joy, because the joy of the Lord is my strength every day. And that's one of the main reasons why I went on this joy-seeking journey through the Gospel of Luke, is to be able to share that joy with everybody. Because once you have that joy, you just can't stop sharing it. It's overflowing.
So as you journeyed through Luke, let's start that over.
Okay.
As you journeyed through Luke, what did you learn about the life of Jesus?
Oh, I learned so much the most recent time I went through when I wrote the book in 2020. I learned because I love, as a health and wellness coach, I love to talk about our mind and body and spirit growth and development and maturity. And so I learned going through Luke this past time how absolutely relatable Jesus is to us. And I think that, growing up as a child, I would hear the stories of Jesus, but I didn't understand the fullness of what he was calling us to in relationship. And so a couple of my favorite verses in Luke are in Luke 2, where it's talking about how Jesus is growing up. He grew up in verse 40. It says he grew up and he grew strong and he was filled with wisdom and the grace of God was upon him. And then in verse 52, it's talking again about him growing in wisdom and stature and in favor with God and man. And so I love to share that with women. I'm like, look at how relatable he is to us. He understood. He came to earth as a man in the flesh. He understands temptations. He understands these things that we're facing on earth. So I really love to encourage women to understand that, to get to know him on a personal message or personal way. And then overall, just what I love about the Gospel of Luke is learning once again about his expectant birth and the great news that brings to the earth. And then watching him in his earthly ministry, how we can learn so much from him and follow him, follow his example, follow his lead. And then he leaves us with, more inspiration for joy when his disciples, after they've watched him ascend into heaven, they returned and they worshiped and they were just filled with great joy. And so I just love the process through the whole book of Luke. It, kind of speaks to the whole Advent season of the great expectation, and then continues the message all the way through and encourages us and leaves us with that message of joy that we need to share with the entire world.
And as you're coaching and you're teaching and you're a worship leader, how do you personally share the good news of great joy with others?
Well, first of all, I have to tell you that I used to tell the Lord, don't ever make me speak. I was too insecure. I felt like I didn't know enough about the Bible, and I don't have a degree in biblical education or anything like that. And so I would sit in church as a casual Christian and I'd be like, don't you dare ever make me speak up. And I would hear these stories of people witnessing to people on the street, and things like that. And I'm like, do not make me do that. And now, like, in a twist, now I'm a speaker and a writer and worship leader. And I absolutely am delighted to, have that privilege to be a worship leader and a writer and a speaker for him. And so I just think it's kind of ironic that I told him I didn't want to do that. And now look, here I am doing it. So I have the most humbling and amazing opportunity to speak with, to connect with them one-on-one, to connect with them in group coaching, to connect with them in health and wellness challenges through my blog and through the 21-day challenges that I offer and the small group coaching. So yeah, it's just, I share his joy wherever I can. And even in my community, I write a little bit about it in the book, about how I used to, be in my community and not be such a nice person. And now I just hope that every person I run into and every person that I touch, even if I might not specifically speak about Jesus to them, I hope that they can sense and know that his joy just through any little interaction that I have with them.
Isn't that amazing how much God will change us and change our hearts? What was that determining moment or factor or experience, Christine, that really started taking you from, as you've mentioned, a casual Christian to a committed believer?
Well, when I finally got to the point where I feel like I really related to the story of Zacchaeus in the Gospel of Luke, where he was just going about his life. He was successful. He was brought up in the faith. I was brought up in the faith. But it wasn't really until he had a stirring in his heart. And I know that the Lord gave me that stirring in my heart too. I didn't recognize it at the time, but when my health was failing so badly and I started feeling terrible every day, and I started getting diagnosed with chronic health issues that I didn't want to be diagnosed with, like fatty liver disease, the only thing I could do to think of at that time was to cry out to the Lord and just ask him for guidance and help me get control of my health. And so I know that he was stirring my heart. And I know, just like Zacchaeus, he stirred his heart. And Zacchaeus climbed up that tree and he wanted a better look. He wanted to see what was going on. And so I began the process of researching and trying to figure out my health in a way that would honor the Lord. And in when Zacchaeus climbed up that tree, Jesus looked up and he saw him. So Jesus knew what was going on. He knew this whole story and how it was going to play out. And I just feel so blessed and incredibly grateful and honored that because of those stirrings in my heart, I started feeling a sense of obedience and started having a very strong desire. Very early on in that journey, he put a very strong desire for me to be in his word every single morning. Wake up. He started waking me up early every single morning. And it is truly like the only thing I crave now. He completely flipped the cravings of my life to crave just time in the word and getting to know him, so that I can go out and share, his good news of great joy with all the world.
Absolutely. Friends, we're going to take a real short commercial break, but when we come back, we're going to continue our discussion and really ask Christine, how can we as listeners prepare our hearts for the Advent season? We'll be right back. Welcome back to your Hope-Filled Perspective, where today we are talking about preparing our hearts for Advent. Christine, let's get real practical. For our listeners, what can we do to prepare our hearts for the Advent season, more than just preparing for Christmas itself?
Right. Well, first of all, I love to encourage women to just really do a heart check. Where are you right now? When I speak with women and they feel like they're full of despair, I get that. I mean, last Christmas season, I was full of despair too. I was in a situation where, looking at the weariness in the world around us, I am still in this weary season right now with a particular family situation that we're still praying for and hoping for relief soon. But that, and just when I hear them talk of this despair, I want to ask them, like, well, where are you with the Lord? What kind of time are you spending with him? And most of the time, they say they haven't been in their regular Bible study and they need to get back to it. And I try to give them advice on how to get back to that. But I really am encouraging them to just fix their eyes on Jesus. That is something that we need to do, that when we consider what he did through the Gospel of Luke, he came, he performed his earthly ministry, he went to the cross for us, for our salvation, and he did that for the joy. That phrase from Hebrews chapter 12 in verses 1-3, where he's talking about everything that he did on the cross. He did that for the joy. So first, I would love to encourage those women to fix their eyes on Jesus. And then it is going to require some sacrifice, especially if you're not used to spending time in the Word in the morning. I love to encourage first thing in the morning, but of course, do it any time of the day that you can. But I feel like first thing in the morning really sets the tone of the day. And so it is going to, require a little bit of sacrifice. We can sacrifice our time. We can sacrifice something from our schedule that maybe we're saying too much yes to. And so we need to, really, what are we doing with our time? Let's prioritize that and make sure that this is a really important time. And then just like Zacchaeus, just completely sold on Zacchaeus, follow you, Lord. And I really encourage the women to do that. And I always love to tell them that if you're not in a daily practice of spending time in the Word, can you do it for 24 days? I mean, here you've got an assignment. It's easy. It's laid out for you. There's 24 chapters in Luke. There's 24 days until Christmas. So let's use that as a tool to connect with Jesus, and just do that as a sacrifice for him to move our hearts into a better place for the Christmas season. It's such a better feeling to than being stuck in the chaos and the weariness of a Christmas season when we fix our eyes and set our hearts on Jesus.
How about for families? Any suggestions that you might have for how families can come together and prepare their hearts for the Advent season?
I would say that a lot of what material in my the moms could use it and share it with their families too.
Start that over. We missed that.
Okay. Oh, I would say that my book is mostly directed for women, but they could use the same material and the same lessons out of it and apply it to their families, and maybe spend, some devotional time with their family every day. And I think it would be something that kids would be really excited about as well. Kids like to do countdowns.
They do.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So if a listener is listening today and they're really struggling with the holidays, maybe there's been grief or loss, or the weariness that you mentioned of just all that we've gone through globally in the past year and a half to 2 years. And they're struggling with this idea of celebrating the Advent season. What hope-filled perspective would you want to leave them with today?
Well, out of that season of weariness, that was the intention of the book. I believe God gave me to encourage people to seek joy. And many of the chapters in the book of Luke are full of joy. And the word joy and rejoice is all throughout the book of Luke. But there are quite a few chapters too that you really have to look in between the lines to seek and find that joy. And so that hard stuff is what, was really a great big learning lesson for me too, because I had this joy from my health and healing journey, right? And that was something that was so evident. But then when I started going through this weary season and this really difficult season with my family, I still had that joy, because I still was able to focus on the joy that he has given me, and it's in my heart. And so I love to encourage people to continue to spend that time in the Word. You have to build that relationship with him, and that is how he is going to put that joy in your heart and keep you sustained, keep you having hope, and keep, everything moving and focused in a direction that's honoring and glorifying to him. Even if your Christmas season, I don't even know what this Christmas season is going to look like again, to be honest, Michelle. With the news coming out in this world, we might be facing another very unusual Christmas season. And I know I saw a lot of hardships. Many of us didn't spend time with our family, even our close family, like our parents, and our elderly parents were alone. And that was hard, to watch that. And some people might have people missing from their Christmas table this season, but our hope can be renewed in the joy of the Lord.
And I think that's so important for us to remember, because what we focus on will grow. And so for myself recently, as I have inadvertently begun to spend more time looking at the news and looking at situations around the world, I have felt a weight and a heaviness. And, the Lord reminded me that's where your focus is. You need to spend a little less time focusing on that and focusing on me, because I am eternal and I am faithful and I am good and I am still on my throne. So focus on me, because that's the only place you're going to find joy that sustains. So piggybacking on what you said, Christine, I think it's so crucial for us to be spending time in God's word every day. And I have made excuses at different times in my life when I thought I was too busy. But we all have 24 hours in a day, and we will spend it on what we prioritize. And if we will prioritize spending time with God first thing in the day, I believe you're right. It does set the trajectory for the rest of the day. And as parents, if we will model that for our children, then that will be a habit that will sustain them into adulthood. So friends, I encourage you to pick up Christine's book, Seeking Joy Through the Gospel of Luke, a Christmas to Calvary Advent Countdown. And we will have all of Christine's information, her bio, her social links, the book, a link to where you can purchase her book on the show notes at drmichelleb.com. But I want to leave you today with a verse that comes from Luke 24, actually verses 52 and 53, that says, "Then they worshiped him and returned to Jerusalem with great joy. And they stayed continually at the temple, praising God." It's my hope for you that in this Advent season, you will experience the great joy that comes from a relationship with the Lord. And that above all else, no matter what's going on in your life, in your community, or in the world, that you will spend that time praising and worshiping the one who came to save us. This has been another episode of Your Hope-Filled Perspective. Until we meet again next week, may you have not only a hope-filled week, but a joy-filled week as well.